Hello, and welcome to this enhanced podcast from Enlightening Science, the outreach wing of the Newton Project at Sussex University. We're dedicated to providing resources to help improve the understanding of Isaac Newton, his importance to both his own time and ours, his influence and his thought. I'm with Alexi Baker of Oxford University. Alexi is an expert on the 18th century trade in scientific instruments in London, and she's going to be talking about the instruments, their makers, and their role in the experimental lectures which flourished in the 18th century. Polite society and public theatre. In this, the fourth and final part of her talk on experimental lecturing in the 18th century, Alexi discusses the genteel audiences for experimental philosophical demonstrations, their fashionable status, and the effect these trends had on Newton's reputation.
Lecturing and instrument making shared many bonds in 18th century England. Lecturers often used instruments in their visual demonstrations, and instrument makers sometimes helped to advertise and to stage their performances, or gave talks themselves. These craftsmen were sometimes truly interested in the subjects involved, but in many instances they were mainly trying to increase their profit margin. In part, lecturing had such commercial potential due to two key social trends: a fashion for natural philosophy among the genteel, and the desire of the English public for theatrical entertainment. The study of natural philosophy was considered proper and stylish among well-heeled and influential Britons. These individuals were encouraged, both explicitly and by the expectations of their fellows, to aspire to, or at least to pretend to, such learning. Decorative instruments could give the impression of having this knowledge, and of fashion and wealth, no matter the actual achievements of their owners. The display and use of expensive pocket-sized telescopes and sets of mathematical instruments could reveal as much about a person's grasp of fine taste and elegant movement as did the way in which they took snuff. Gentlemen often decorated their studies with globes, astronomical prints, and sometimes larger telescopes and microscopes. This is in part why some trade members sold fashionable items including jewelry and the fripperies known as toys alongside instruments. This fashion for natural philosophy greatly increased the sale of instruments and related publications, especially those which were also aesthetically pleasing, and it increased attendance at public and domestic lectures as well. During the 1700s, authors increasingly encouraged young adults and women to join men in learning about natural philosophy and sometimes to use instruments like the telescope. A highly popular example is the book Sir Isaac Newton's Philosophy Explained for the Use of the Ladies. It was written in Italian by Francesco Algarotti and translated into English in 1739. Algarotti idolized the earlier author Bernard de Fontenelle, whose book, The Plurality of Worlds, had, he said, first softened the savage nature of philosophy and called it from the solitary closets and libraries of the learned to introduce it into the circles and toilets of ladies. The Italian hoped to do the same for the ideas of Isaac Newton as Fontenelle had done for those of Descartes, by enticing ladies to them through the changing viewpoint of a fictional noblewoman. With influences such as this being widespread, the fashionable and genteel sphere of science kept expanding and could be highly profitable. And that trend bound interrelated trades and pursuits, including instrument-making, printing, and lecturing, even closer together. However, instrument makers did not only find natural philosophy profitable within such stately and demure circles. It was also extolled in the wider public sphere, in which Londoners and provincial English alike often attended entertainments with more of a flamboyant or even circus-like air. In the days before radio and television, street performances, exhibitions of wonders and curiosities, and all manner of theatrical shows were of great importance. Some members of the instrument trade already indulged in the florid showmanship that was so characteristic of the 18th century. For example, the optical instrument maker and diverse retailer George Wilday erected what he advertised as being an amazing giant burning glass on the roof of his house, as a sort of tourist attraction to rival that in the Privy Garden in Whitehall. And the optician John Marshall painted his name on the roof of a house about 20 buildings away from his own, so that customers could test his telescopes by viewing it. With lecturing, this approach to extolling the virtues of instruments could mesh with the grander flourishes of the theater. A well-publicized example is that of Adam Walker's presentation of his large transparent orrery in the late 1700s. Instead of presenting a three-dimensional orrery, Walker used back projection to show astronomical bodies in motion on a screen while he lectured over the music of a hand-cranked Celestina organ. One of Walker's handbells trumpeted with a characteristic overuse of capital letters. "This elaborate and splendid machine, which is 15 feet square, and has been exhibited 3 seasons in the Theatre Royal Haymarket to brilliant and crowded audiences, who have bestowed on it the most flattering encomiums. Every motion in this complex variety seems without cause or support. The sublime and awful simplicity of nature is daringly imitated." In instances such as these, lectures on natural philosophy and the instruments which they employed, whether in 2 or 3 dimensions, possessed an even higher than normal proportion of entertainment to edification, and they no doubt made a pretty penny. Thus the meeting of these two trades can result in many manifestations of both, from the more serious to the relatively commercial and lightweight. On its own, the instrument trade exhibited a similar dichotomy in its invocation of Newtonianism. Instruments were sometimes marketed with reference to the great man, and some trade members, such as the optician Francis Watkins at Charing Cross, even took his image as their shop sign. This was sometimes just a commercial strategy for enhancing the reputation of the shopkeeper and his wares, just as some trade members similarly invoked the Royal Society and their better-known clients. In this manner, the trade not only contributed to the perpetuation of Newtonian concepts, but also to the popular mythology and iconography which was already springing up around Isaac Newton and his discourse, as you can see in images like this one. The instrument trade of the 18th century was supported and influenced by the sometimes fanciful meanderings of what would later be called science. But in the main it existed to serve and to survive the immensely practical world which stretched from the streets of London across the vast highways of the sea. Similarly, Newtonianism and lectures on that subject did not only exist in the realm of intellectual exploration and complex mathematics. It was also very much public property in the form of mainstream publications and imagery, genteel posturing and display, and presentations given across London and the provinces, sometimes as much for entertainment as for anything else. These different manifestations are largely results of the nature of early modern society and of London specifically, which was an ever-expanding and ever-changing beast. The city was shaped by an array of influences, with commercial concerns being some of the strongest. The interrelated trades of the lecturer and of the instrument maker entered this multifaceted urban prism and reemerged in a variety of forms and degrees, far more complex than the simple pursuit of knowledge.
This enhanced podcast has been an Enlightening Science production from the University of Sussex. The sound recordist was Lucy Cook. It was edited by Lucy Cook and Pete Langman. The producer was Pete Langman.